and sometimes Rashad Fenton out there on the perimeter. And then basically everybody on the inside is interchangeable. They use their slot corner, Kendall Fuller, who had been considered to be their best corner going into this. They drop him back as a safety. They blitz Honey Badger sometimes. And Juan Thornhill is kind of the one big loss they've suffered. He, their rookie safety, probably the fastest dude. That he was the guy they trusted to be on the far back end, to be the last line of defense. Well, he's out now. He's on IR. But they've been kind of mixing in some other dudes. They're pretty deep at their safety groups, and those safeties have helped everybody else. And just the way that they've been able to do, basically, use those guys all over the place and make it so quarterbacks never know what they're looking at there. What are you expecting out of this Texans offense?
Anybody who's turned on a sports opinion show has been inundated with the stat of what the Texans offense looks like with and without Will Fuller. As you mentioned, he's questionable so far this week, pending the Wednesday injury update. It's Will Fuller. There's always something kind of hurt and wrong with him. So with him to be able to take the top off the defense, to test your guys' back end speed, that's going to open up a lot. It's going to kind of what the Bills were able to do is they were able to rush their front four, get pressure on Watson, drop 7 into coverage, and what the Texans ended up doing, at least in the first half, was, okay, well, we'll bring in a second tight end and we'll keep 2 tight ends on the line. We'll allow a back to chip. Well, if you start adding up all those positions, you got 5 on the line plus 2 tight ends plus a back to chip plus, Deshaun Watkins actually having to throw the ball. Suddenly you only have 2 or 3 guys out running in coverage against 7. Even if you send 2 extra rushers, now you still have 5 to cover 2. And so what the Bills were able to do there is also keep a spy in specifically for Watson. Now, with Will Fuller, assuming that he gets to play, you're able to stretch that field. So now all of a sudden your free safety can't sneak up to be within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. He's going to have to start back, 15 yards and actually keep playing back there. If you want to bracket DeAndre Hopkins, now all of a sudden you pulled another person off the line. You guys have a pretty good front 7 as far as being able to generate some pressure. At least that's what it seemed like in Kansas City's game against the Texans. But then again, everybody can generate pretty good pressure against the Texans. So take that with a grain of salt. Hopefully, if Will Fuller plays, we're able to, push those guys back a little bit. I would really like to see Duke Johnson get involved. I know that, in the October game, we relied a lot more on Carlos Hyde. Our great success against the Bills last week and just kind of the better overall runner appeared to be Duke Johnson. So if you can get people moving laterally like Duke Johnson, put DeAndre Hopkins in crossing routes, and allow Will Fuller to stretch that, now you have the defense moving both laterally and vertically. And if you can do that, instead of allowing the Chiefs to spy Deshaun Watson, maybe he can get a little bit lost in the shuffle, put in a nice little designed RPO, and just, make the Chiefs commit to either going after Watson, the ball carrier, or the running back out of the backfield, or the crossing route that's going to be coming right in front of Deshaun Watson at that point. So all of a sudden that middle linebacker has, a choice to make, and then you can quickly opt out to get one-on-one coverage or a one-on-one matchup and hopefully a one-on-one mismatch with either that running back, or if the linebacker takes the running back, have Watson run it, or just, chuck it out to Hopkins or Fuller.
Yeah, no, I think you're dead on there, and that's exactly what sort of worries me with the loss of Juan Thornhill, just because he was kind of the one safety who had the range where you could totally feel comfortable with being in a single high safety set, bring everybody else into the box, and he's going to be able to go sideline to sideline, you're fine. But now on top of the fact he's not there, they don't have anybody quite that athletic there, and you're now talking about, so first of all, you're thinking, okay, maybe we're going to run some more too high, which is narrowing your playbook in terms of your blitzes and all the other creative things they want to do in the middle of the defense. The Chiefs linebackers are not very athletic. They're all pretty slow, run-thumping guys. It's actually been it's probably the weakest part of the defense overall, is just those guys' inability to keep up with dudes with speed. And so if you're going to be covering running backs out of the backfield, you probably want a safety on that too. Chiefs have no problem running 3 or 4 safety sets. But then you also probably want to spy Deshaun Watson, and that, again, is not a job you necessarily want to give to one of our linebackers. On the other hand, again, the last time Frank Clark was still dealing with, his early injuries. Chris Jones wasn't there. And so I think there's going to be a lot of pressure up the middle. So, but that's the other thing is I think Deshaun Watson is the sort of guy who can make stuff happen even when everything else is falling apart around him. On the other side, you guys made additions to your secondary as the season went on, Garyon Conley and the one other guy, I can't remember. But either way, I mean, I feel like your back end is stronger and more likely to be able to hold up against the Chiefs passing attack, or less?
Probably less, based just solely on how much we struggled against you guys in October. I mean, Mahomes didn't have a great game, was injured, and still threw for 3 touchdowns and a pick. Tyreek Hill was limited, still got 2 touchdowns and I believe over 100 yards. I believe you'll have Sammy Watkins back. As you saw against the Bills, the pass coverage did struggle. It struggled against John Brown. He was open several times and made either Josh Allen missed the throw just by a little bit, or John Brown made some questionable choices as far as when to jump or not. And then they just get lit up by Duke Williams. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe Duke Williams would be about a 4th receiver for you guys, as opposed to a second option. If we can't cover a 50-yard Hail Mary to a fullback, I'm thinking against a more accurate quarterback in Patrick Mahomes, that we're going to struggle even greater. No, I'm not confident at all in the secondary, which puts a ton of pressure on the front 7 to put pressure on Patrick Mahomes and to make his life a little bit more difficult. And going back to what you were saying about unathletic linebackers, I always hate using the term unathletic when describing NFL players, because I could never hope to be as athletic as the unathletic ones. But we'll say slower, like you did. You look in the Texans linebacking core, and we already have 3 guys on IR for the year. So at when the Clowney trade happened and Berkavis Mingo became kind of a punchline as a throw into that trade, now he's playing a lot of meaningful snaps for us. So when you're looking at the linebacker core to either limit the run game or look to send an extra pass rusher every once in a while, or even just use a linebacker as a spy of Patrick Mahomes, that's simply not going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a fascinating game where I think both sides have the firepower to score quickly. I see some big plays on both sides of this game, and it's really going to be down to, I think, the coaching on both sides to just make sure that they aren't coming away with nothing on drives and keeping things going. Reed has got to coach a good game, and your favorite coach in the NFL, Bill O'Brien, has to as well.
Yeah, and, the Texans come out in a traditionally run-heavy approach, at least the first, couple drives, the scripted plays. Weirdly, they've performed above expectations on those runs, according to some PFF advanced metrics. That still leads to a lot of 3-and-outs. Texans are a notoriously slow starting team as far as scoring points. This season has been no exception. Bill O'Brien has been notoriously slow at scoring points in the playoffs. In fact, he's now 2-3 in the playoffs with wins against the Bills and I believe a Matt McGloin-led Oakland Raiders team. So if you take away the Matt McGloin Oakland Raiders win, Bill O'Brien in 4 playoff games has scored right at 50 points, or maybe a little bit less than 50 points. 3 of those games he was shut out in the first half, including the Bills this past week. So it's truly amazing that you can't even get a field goal in six quarters of football. That said, we have to cite the October game as frequently as possible. That game had 7 Texans drives of 9 or more plays. That would be amazing, and I'm sure that is probably what everybody would advocate, being a 10-point underdog. Everybody talks about shrinking the game, shrinking the total number of possessions. I mean, that's fine, but that only works if you're coming away with points on those drives very efficiently. Texans do not have an overly efficient offense, which is kind of strange given all the weapons that they have. And so I would advocate for a nice high tempo, up-tempo game plan, try for the high variance game plan, kind of like what the Bills did at the beginning of the playoff game last week, where, you're playing with house money at this point. You're going into some place expecting to lose, or rather everyone is expecting you to lose. So why not put on a good show and, try to do something that hasn't been seen by the team or by your opponent?
Yeah, I think the biggest plays very well in this game could be plays that are made by players on the field, irrelevant of what was actually sketched up there, because Mahomes and Watson are among the best sort of improvisers on the field in this game. Seems like no one has made this stat. I would kind of like to see a stat of like red zone when Watson is hit multiple times or kicked in the face in the red zone, like what his scoring percentage is. Because he's had just
what is your QB rating after first hit? It's kind of like the running back yards after contact, but like QB rating after contact.
Something like that, I think, would be Watson's going to come up looking real good. Let's just jump into some quick X factors here. Just an obvious X factor for me, I think, is going to be Frank Clark. He had this nerve issue the first half of the year. He said that, like, once he kind of got through it, that he was probably at somewhere around like 20% in week one. He finished the year with 8 sacks, basically all of those coming in kind of the final 9 or 10 games. And he's been a force both against the run and in terms of the pass rush alongside Chris Jones. It's huge. And the Chiefs have figured out ways of stuffing the middle of the line. And so, if Frank Clark can keep being the two-way guy on the end, I think he has a big game in this and really kind of shows that, he was worth all the assets that the Chiefs threw at him this offseason. Who do you have as your X factor in this game?
I rather disingenuously picked J.J. Watt last week. It was kind of surprising considering he led the broadcast in number of reaction shots, and I believe his number of reaction shots outnumbered the number of snaps he actually played. But I think for this one, just given the lower impact that he had on the first game, the added stress that's going to get put on him, both from having to deal with Patrick Mahomes as well as a slightly better run game, I'm going to have to say Whitney Merciless. There are going to be some offensive plays in this game. I'm with Tyreek Hill, hopefully Will Fuller plays. If somebody said that there were 3 passing plays over 50 yards, I don't think anybody would be shocked by that. In fact, I think people would be like, only 3, given these two teams. So I think there's going to be a lot of underrated plays or undercovered plays. Hopefully Whitney Merciless makes a few of those that turns, a 2nd and 5 or 2nd and 6 into like a 3rd and 10, or at least getting it to 3rd down. Not that the Texans are particularly great at defending 3rd downs, but, just something to try and kill a drive, because, it would not shock me to have, video game numbers on this for the final score here.
All right. And like all playoffs, where the stakes are the highest, we got to raise the stakes between us. And so I propose it's sort of a simple wager for us. We're both, it's not like me and Monty. We're not out to humiliate one another. We're pretty friendly guys. But we want to enhance, in the nature of good sportsmanship, your viewing of your own team in the AFC Championship game next week, which is, so meaning whoever loses this game is going to be sending the other, a nice 6-pack of preferably, beer local to that spot to enhance the enjoyment of their team advancing beyond this game.
Yeah, that sounds great. I toyed with the idea of saying, 1 12-ounce beer per point difference. But then I remember the just 30-0 drubbing that the Chiefs put on the Texans a couple years back. And I'm going to hedge a little bit, but no, that sounds like an excellent idea, and I am all on board for that.
I would not turn down 30 beers if it comes to that. I just want to make that clear.
You would be getting a case of 30 Keystones.
Which, hey, if I need to water my plants, at least, I have it already there, already canned.
Well, we never got to an actual pick. I assume you're taking the Chiefs.
Oh, right.
That you're willing to wager on them.
Yeah, I just blew right past it. I assumed we both were.
Well, I'll put the onus on you to throw out a score, and it is a 10-point Kansas City favor. So do with that what you will. And what's your score prediction?
Well, if the spread is 10 points, I am going to pick the Chiefs to win, but not cover the spread. They win 37-28.
37-28. Okay, so they just sneak in the cover. If they go that route, I'm sure Watson I'm sure they would have some crazy 2-minute drill down by 14 points. I would like to be blatant homer like I was